All right, want to say welcome. Sunumi Brown here. I Never Knew TV. What's going on?
Hi. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Have you ever felt that psychedelics reconnected you with parts of your soul or ancestral memory that past wounds or colonization tried to erase? And there's a second part. What did that feel like for you?
I absolutely think that it has connected me back with an ancestral memory. I had a recent experience last year, actually, where I was able to hear the voices of my ancestors. And I think that's a really unique thing. I think that usually when we are calling on our ancestry, we typically can't actually hear their own voices and the sound of their voice. But that's the power of the medicine. It's very unique in that way. I think a movie that portrays something similar to this very well is like a Wakanda when he, consumes the herb. That's just an emphasis to plant medicine in many ways. It's really showing us the potentiality of what can happen. And in that particular case, I've had a plethora of experiences and they all have offered me something different. But in this particular case, I was able to hear the voices of my ancestry and I was able to communicate with them directly in a way that I never was able to before. And it was able to clear up some dysfunction that I was carrying. And come to find out, the dysfunction was because of old beliefs that were carried within my ancestral lineage that I had the privilege of being, the one who was supposed to come and clear those old wounds.
How do you prepare for those experiences? And how do you source the psychedelics for that experience?
That's a really good question. The preparation is it's pretty standard. One of the things that we always ask is that you go on what's called a dieta, and basically it's a process of only consuming fruits and vegetables. So basically a plant-based diet. You don't want to consume anything that's been processed or anything that's going to add any additional density to the body. You want to make sure that the body is as clear as possible. You want to spend some time in nature and ground yourself and reacclimate yourself if you haven't been. Take a little bit of time off of social media and, kind of detox yourself a little bit. And I think lastly, if you're consuming or over consuming anything, be very conscious of what it is. And for instance, if you're working with other plant medicines like cannabis or anything like that, you may want to just give it a little bit of a break at least a week before. So that's how you prepare the body. Preparing the space is a whole nother thing. There is something called set and setting that we kind of offer to community as a guideline. And what it means is that you want to be very aware of what environment you are consuming this in. Awareness is key because this medicine brings you deeper into your awareness. So you being aware of everything and everybody in the space is super important. Do people do this casually? Absolutely. Do I recommend it? Not so much, especially if you're using it as a growth tool. So what I would recommend is that you're in an environment where you are safe, where you can access some sort of silence within yourself and within the space, and what felt like the root were doing these practices. And a part of the practice was for me to remove myself of these labels. For example, trees. We call them trees. We think we know what trees do. And I just started looking at trees from a completely different perspective, removing the label and saying, I don't know what it does. Imagine that I don't know what it does. I don't know what it's called. I don't know how it functions, just nothing. And as I started to observe it and look at it, it just cleared the slate for me. And it made me more comfortable with saying, I don't know, and being in that space of vulnerability and being more receptive to just listening and looking at things for what they are.
Why do you think so many people struggle to understand what they truly want in life? How can practices like meditation, yoga, or even microdosing help uncover those authentic desires beneath the surface conditioning?
People struggle because of confusion primarily. People are super fixated on their desires, and their desires are just a byproduct of their thoughts. And your thoughts, what we learn in yoga tradition is that your thoughts are not you. They're a part of the space that you're in, or the people that you're around, or the environment that you're picking up on. But they're not your thoughts. So when we can rid ourselves of that, the desires start to dissolve, like slowly after it. And you start to be left with what we call more fundamental desires, things that are more in alignment with life's natural desires for progression, and things like, joy, things like authentic connection, things like health, you know? These things, they may seem cliche on the surface, but to those who are really needing those things in their life, they realize and they know just how important those things really are to the human experience.
I also wanted to delve a little deeper with the unconditioning process. There's another difficulty there, right? Trusting yourself to accept your perception of how you view stuff, because you've been so bombarded your whole life with a certain idea about stuff.
Yeah, trusting yourself. It becomes so much easier when you are not taking too much credit for your thoughts. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you it's not even a process of trusting yourself. For me, once I do my prayers and I ask to be made a vessel in a particular situation, then it's more about me trusting my devotion than trusting myself. And if you have a devotional practice, if you're doing yoga, if you're very committed to being in nature, if you're very committed to your health, either one of these things you can lean on for your deepening your faith. So I look at it like that. I just focus more on my faith.
All right, you spoke about some experiences earlier, right? I have a question here. Have you ever had a journey where psychedelics brought up grief, pain, or a hidden truth you didn't know you were holding? How did you process that experience?
Yeah, it does almost every time. And that's what we want. Like, we want to be made more aware of what we can't see. And typically, the things that are hiding are grief and pain, and the things that are a little bit uncomfortable. I think how I integrated it is the most important part of it, though, because one of the things that I focus on as an advocate and as a support in the psychedelic space is that integration is key. Oftentimes, when we're having experiences and we come into our awareness, we become a bit overpowered, or sometimes we're just empowered and we make very rash and impulsive decisions, and then we're forced to pay the consequences of it. Like, for example, say you've been living a little bit out of integrity and you need to be honest with yourself about some things. You take a medicine journey, a psychedelic journey, and you start to become more aware. What oftentimes happens that I see in this space is that people will become aware and then go and do an action that follows that awareness immediately. Why this is a bit of a problem is because you haven't integrated enough to know how to fully act without causing, harm to yourself and the other people involved. Sometimes you going and immediately quitting your job before you have enough money saved up has some harsh consequences on you. And then you want to blame the plant medicine for it, you know? So just taking a second to realize that the job may not be for you and that it's time to make a shift, but not being so quick to act on it.
Do it in a realistic manner. Do it in a realistic manner.
Exactly.
Do you believe psychedelics have the potential to help Black and Indigenous people reconnect with ancestral wisdom and long suppressed spiritual technologies?
Yeah. I'll say that yoga is a long suppressed spiritual technology that oftentimes you don't really know you need unless you have an experience that makes it make sense. It's hard when you have social media at the touch of a button to compare to sitting and what seems like you're doing nothing. You know what I'm saying? You're getting these constant dopamine fixes. You're feeling like, you're making real progress, maybe in your career. It quote unquote offers you a lot, right? So it seems. And then when you think about things like meditating and stillness, you're not really sure of what the immediate effects of that are. And so working with psychedelics can help it make more sense for you. I think for me, a direct example of it was I was able to see that the things that I really wanted were not sustainable in the way that I was going about them. Like going towards,
I know what you're saying, but elaborated on it more for those listening.
yeah, I think like for a person who was building a brand and things like that on social media, I was seeing how, yes, it's great to do these things and to collaborate and to connect with community. But when community actually gets in front of you, knowing what to do with it is super important. And if you do not have tools, then you won't know how to keep the community together. You'll pull it towards you, but you won't really know how to sustain it. And so yoga for me is all about sustainability at its core, and that's why it's an ancient tradition. That's why it's ancient and still very prevalent to this day. Something that's thousands and thousands of years old is still being used to this day because it is sustainable. And people know that. And those who are still carrying on this practice to this day can show you how it's done. And it can become a tool in your tool belt. And tools are what keeps community together. Social media is not something that has been around enough to know if it even has the potentiality to sustain something for so long. So we have to respect the practices that have been here for a very long time and make sure that we're utilizing those just as much as the things that are new to our awareness.
You mentioned social media, right? And I think one of the biggest issues people have is that because they're overstimulated, they're kind of conditioned not to be quiet, but they have a deep fear of being quiet. Like I really see it. People are terrified of just sitting with themselves. And what I learned in my short life is that most people know the least amount about the person they spend the most time with, which is themselves, But you learn the most about yourself sitting in silence.
Yeah, yeah. That's very interesting. The silence journey is inescapable if you are on a growth journey. Like silence is the very thing that is going to bridge you to a heightened perception and just more clarity overall. And one of the things that, even going back to that experience that I was talking to you about that happened last year, where I was able to hear the voices of my ancestors, it came from me going into the journey with a listening practice. I was listening. I was just sitting and listening. I was at a creek, I was listening to the water. And in the process of listening, I was offered something, you know? So yeah, silence is truly inescapable, and as you continue to journey with it, you'll realize just how invaluable it is.
And what advice would you give someone who's trying to start the journey of being silent, whether it's for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 minutes?
My dad used to do this practice when I was younger. He used to do vows of silence, and he wouldn't say anything for like an entire week at a time. He'd completely go into observation mode. And what I realized that would happen to him when he would come out of these spaces is that he would be able to discern what the family needed. So if you're trying to go on this journey, I think that offering your listening ear in spaces where you wouldn't normally would be a great start.
All right. In many spaces, psychedelics gets a bad rap, right? People talk about bad trips and different things. Question I have for you, though. If more people in our communities had access to safe, intentional, and guided psychedelic experiences, how do you think it would transform our collective healing, resistance, and spiritual evolution?
Yeah, I think that psychedelics are not for everybody. I don't think that. And the reason that I say that is because of kind of what I touched on earlier, where you become empowered and then you make a quick action. There are people who have been deprived of the feeling of empowerment for a very long time. And when they get a hold of that, they become overpowered.
Clarify what you mean by empowerment.
Yeah. I think when I say empowerment, I mean just a feeling of, or just more so, a combination of a deeper awareness and clarity and confidence, you know? So when you kind of mix those things in a pot, if not balanced, like if you didn't come in with enough integrity or enough, you know,
Intention, good intention.
yeah, intention, enough roots, right? You can become unstable. And I think that one of the things I want to emphasize for like offering it to a community is that you don't have to do this. You don't have to use this tool. There are many tools that I teach. There are many tools that were taught to me. And some of them involve the breath. Some of them involve stillness. Some of them involve song. Song is such a beautiful, beautiful gift, especially in the psychedelic space. But even outside of the psychedelic space, we see how music and song shapes culture and generations. And it's truly a medicinal and healing experience. So there's many tools that we can grasp from. It does not have to be a psychedelic one. Now, for those who have worked on their integrity and done some work on, establishing more roots for themselves, and if you have done it, then you are fully aware of what I'm talking about. This may be for you. I think in what I've learned is that we're not going to overemphasize psilocybin as a cure-all. It's just not. We're going to emphasize tools and pairing psilocybin in conjunction with other things. We have a very colonized mindset in that way where sometimes we try to isolate something, where we try to say, this is the one thing that can fix it, or this is the one person. We're interdependent. This tool is interdependent. It's in conjunction with all things. And so I think, again, emphasizing in conjunction with other things, it could be a powerful catalyst for community healing, but we cannot sleep on the necessity for the other tools to be paired with it.
When we spoke previously, right, you spoke about the use of psychedelics with depression and breaking the loop. So question I have for you is, how can the guided use of psychedelics support people living with depression, especially in breaking free from the loops of thought that keep them stuck in that emotional state?
I'm going to talk about this from my personal perspective, and kind of like a little bit of a story. When I experienced postpartum depression, a form of postpartum depression, which is called baby blues. If you don't know what baby blues is, it's an experience of a mother experiencing disassociation from her child right after the baby is born. This experience is something that it's a heartache for a mama to look at the baby that she just birthed and feel confusion, you know? And this is something that I personally experienced. What helped support me out of that was microdosing. And it was in conjunction with other things. It was in conjunction with yoga. I was also doing some chanting at that time. And I think just the combination of that plus some sound healing and then community, it kind of all brought it full circle. But microdosing is a powerful gift. What is a microdose? A microdose is anything under zero point 0.5 milligrams. It is a very small dosage of psilocybin. It's nothing too heavy on the system. It's nothing too taxing on your energy. So if you are a mom, this would be really good for you. But again, like, this is not something that you have to do. It is just one of the tools. A little bit of the science, it expands those neurological synapses in the brain, and that's what keeps us utilizing those same thoughts and those same behavioral patterns. And oftentimes when we see somebody that has depression, they'll say the same lines over and over again. They'll say things like, well, I don't really know, or I don't think I could do that, or no, I'm good. That's not for me. Or, those kind of lines, those are just a sign that your neurological pathways are utilizing the same circuits over and over again. And they've become fixed in a way where they have trouble branching out and creating new ideas and being creative. So what microdosing does is it subtly just starts to expand those branches and helps us to think differently. And it can be very helpful. It can be very, very helpful, especially in that postpartum sector of life.
Yeah, I never heard about that mental loop in regards to depression, but it makes sense though, right? So don't get too sciencey on this, right? But break down, like, how does it break the loop?
From what I know, it's just a process of just expanding the neurons. Like, when you take the medicine, that's literally directly what it does. And I think the best way for people to understand this is if you know anything about mycelium, which is it's basically the mushrooms in it's in a different form. It's not in the form of an actual mushroom. It's in the form of the fungus that is underneath the ground. You can see how mycelium spreads and connects with each other. It's very similar to like your nervous system and how it connects. It has these branches and these basically these fingertips that communicate and send these neurological signals or synapses to each other. Trees have it, mycelium has it, and everybody is kind of using this same form of connection with each other. And so from what I know about that is just it mimics nature in that way and kind of does the same exact process that we already know.
In your TED Talk, right, you mentioned how your mother longed to experience stillness. That really stayed with me. Why do you think it's so difficult for people, especially in today's world, to be still? We touched on it a little briefly, but how does this resistance to stillness stunt our growth?
Yeah, we did touch on it. It's really interesting because my mom's experience with stillness was a huge catalyst for her to believe in stillness, if that makes sense. It absolutely stunts our growth if we don't understand why it's necessary, which is kind of what I talked about last time. It's just so important for us to have these direct experiences so that we can have the reason why behind something. And I think in her particular case, she got that reason why, you know? And I had touched on this earlier, and I touched on this a little bit in the TED Talk, but it made her more receptive, not just to stillness, but to many things. It made her more receptive to, let's actually say that it made her more receptive to stillness. And in being still, she was more clear, more aware, and, more open. And the next day she had went on a date, and literally 2 years later, she married that very person. So it's such an incredible story. It's such an impactful story because she had struggled with love for a very long time. Many failed relationships, and I don't really like to call them a fail in full because you learn something from everyone. But, you know, many relationships that didn't offer her the unity that she was looking for. And just in, the one trip that we had together, she was able to clear enough blockages to be able to journey on that experience towards unity.
I'm glad you used the word blockages because I was going to say, like, since I've been meditating, right? A therapist actually put me up on meditation. And it's just being open to stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm hearing you saying, maybe your mother was just open to experiences.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. She was open enough to journey with me before. And that's what I mean by having a little bit of roots already. My mom has a way of being, she's sensitive like a lot of us. And I was shocked, to say the least. I was very shocked that she was open to it. But yeah, she was open enough to do that, and in turn, it offered her receptivity beyond what she even knew.